The neocons are dreaming of a global NATO, and it is frankly scary. If we look for a second at what was published recently in the typical outlets, we find here from a couple of days ago an article in Foreign Policy by Mr. Bart M. Shevchik, who is this person over here, visiting senior fellow at the German Marshall Fund. Of course, the German Marshall Fund is a typical transatlantic cutout in Germany that is basically there to kind of connect the intellectual elites, the neocon elites of Germany and the broader Europe with North America. And Mr. Shevchik wrote this article here, The Case for a Bigger, Bolder NATO in Foreign Policy. And to be fair, it was published under the argument section, which is a place where foreign policy basically accepts any kind of or a lot of different forms of viewpoints to have a broad discussion. So this is not pure propaganda. This is like clearly labeled as the ideas of a certain person and belong to these people. But since this person is from the German Marshall Fund, it's worth looking at what they're saying. And it is quite scary, the vision that these people lay out. Security issues are dispersed across too many forums and organizations. An obstacle to effective decisions and strategy. So we know where this is going. Is a person who would like to have more centralization under, of course, a bigger, bolder NATO. So that NATO, that institution of peace that has never done any harm in its entire history and would never dare to infringe upon international law the way it did in Serbia in 1999, the way it was used to bomb Libya, and so on, and the way that it has very significant part cost the Ukraine war by being absolutely incapable and unwilling to negotiate with the Russians. That NATO, that needs to be bigger and bolder. We start off with, as NATO prepares to celebrate its 75th anniversary next year, the bloc's original architects would have been stunned by its broad membership and growing agenda today. And the author actually then says that some people who were the original Cold Warriors, who were part of the people who conceived NATO, wouldn't agree with this, what NATO became. US diplomat George Kennan argued that NATO should take its name literally and include only North Atlantic countries, excluding Mediterranean states such as Greece, Italy, and Turkey. George Kennan was famously against NATO enlargement. George Kennan famously said when the first round of enlargements came that this is the greatest blunder of the early 21st century and will probably lead to a war with Russia. George Kennan understood precisely that expanding NATO will not serve the purpose of creating more security for Europe. It will reduce the security for Europe. And boy, was George Kennan right, looking at the fact that we now have a new war. But of course, these neocons, they would not blame themselves. They will never look for faults in them. They will always project all of their fears and all of their objectives to the significant other, in this case Russia, and then claim that for everything evil that happens in the world, the other one is responsible, right? Your own actions, including the actions of the United States in Iraq and so on, those are at worst blunders. But you got to struggle to learn, right? That's the mindset of these people. And here we have somebody who then lays out why the organization that can potentially create blunders should be even bigger. Today, NATO has 31 member states, although when Sweden joins, it will be 32, and we will see how long this will take until it actually happens. But I have no more illusions. Sweden will become a member, as Finland already is. The question is how. I mean, de facto, Sweden is a member already. It's just it hasn't signed the papers yet, but it has already moved in for all intents and purposes. With the return of war to Europe and the Middle East, as well as great power competition to the world, NATO's vision and scope need to be broader. Because before 2022, February 2022, everything was peaceful. The world was a paradise, right? And then for the first time now we are having war again, the first time since like times immemorable, right? This stupid narrative that we're seeing again and again, the scaremongering, the fear-mongering, and also the deliberate this deliberate act of forgetting the wars in the Balkans, right? How Yugoslavia was broken apart to a good part also by the actions of NATO. The all of the other horrible conflicts that happened in the last 20 years, including Afghanistan and Iraq, all of this is forgotten. And by now, what we're supposed to focus on is that these new threats, right? The Russians in the northeast, and the evil Hamas, the terrorists in the Middle East, they have blown up the peaceful international rules-based international order that the benign United States and benign NATO managed to create. All of this is crumbling because, well, NATO is too weak. Therefore, NATO needs to be stronger. That's the idea. The alliance faces not only Russian aggression, but also the challenge from China and other autocratic revisionist actors seeking to upend the global order. Oh, my friends, these people are... I believe that they believe this. I mean, this is an argument probably made in good faith that this person publishes under his name and wants to put out there. So I have no problems with believing that this is the mindset of this person who actually views China and other autocratic revisionist actors as seeking to upend the global order. I mean, whatever this person with that order means, and despite the fact that China, except for a war with Vietnam, back in the very late 70s, hasn't had wars. If you look at the most aggressive power that has like wars outside of its territory since the Cold War, since the Second World War, is the United States. The United States is the most dangerous country in terms of the one that has been fighting most wars outside of its borders. There's no other country that can match it. But for some reason, the country we need to worry about is one that has been sitting still for the last 70 years, more or less. Okay, fine. Again, that's the mindset of these people. Europe and the United States should leverage NATO to buttress international order alongside their Indo-Pacific partners. Yeah, NATO shouldn't just be for the North Atlantic, it should also be for the Indo-Pacific. NATO should be everywhere, for all the waters and all the lands. Like everywhere we need NATO, more NATO. To that end, the institution should globalize its agenda and find ways to work more closely with its partners outside the Euro-Atlantic region. Yeah, because the Euro-Atlantic is so small, right? You can't do anything there. There's not enough potential to warmonger within your ally system because the allies are safe. So if you want to warmonger, if you want to have more wars, then you should go outside and then use these allies in order to bomb again, maybe the Afghans again. Why not? Why not bomb the Iraqis again? Why not try to have a good old proxy war with China, either in Central Asia or in Southeast Asia? I mean, why not in Taiwan? Why not on this island of 24 million people, a good old proxy war? And let's include NATO assets as much as possible. And then pull a second Ukraine in the Indo-Pacific. Wouldn't that be beautiful? And have the Taiwanese do the dying, and we do the shipping of the weapons. We do the routing. We change all of our Facebook profiles to little Taiwan flags. Wouldn't that be wonderful? Everybody would be happy. I despise these people so much, honestly. Like these warmongers, I can't take that anymore. I mean, if you build an alliance and if you build war potential and you make it bigger and bigger, I mean, you must not be astonished that you will end up with a war. If you prepare for war, you will get a war. And everybody who says, "Oh, if you want peace, prepare for war." No, if you want peace, prepare for peace. Okay, I mean, I have no qualms with trying to defend yourself at home and preparing for that. But if you prepare to create all of this potential to then jointly strike, then don't be surprised if you start jointly striking and then you do something as stupid as Iraq. Okay, you do something as stupid as Iraq that kills 1 million people. But then again, it's not your people and you're not the one suffering it, therefore it's fine. That's why I really dislike these neocons, because they will never go and fight themselves. They will always send the kids of others, the kids of poor people, and they will kill poor people and kids of poor people over there, just as they are doing with Ukraine right now as we speak. And then, well, he talks about the issues, the problems that NATO has. And that's that, the Western firepower is distributed over too many institutions, right? The EU also has a mutual defense clause, not just NATO. Then we have the quadrilateral security dialogue with Australia, India, Japan, the United States. We have the G7. We have the US Trade and Technology Council. So all of this overlap produces confusion and lack of focus, restricting the ability of NATO members to develop an effective strategy, let alone make efficient decisions in times of conflict. So it's very clear what he wants: just bundle NATO countries' decision and war-making capacity into the NATO umbrella, so that you can more easily go to war. To remove these political disaster and bureaucratic obstacles, it would make sense for many of these discussions and decisions to take place in a single forum, or at least for the various strings to come together in one place, and that would be NATO. NATO, the organization for everything, right? It used to be here to kind of function as a deterrent toward the Soviet Union, but now the Soviet Union is gone. So why not make NATO a shop for everything? Why not all the decision making for all of these democratic countries happening inside NATO? Why not have a king of NATO, so that the king of NATO can decide what then the alliance has to do, so that you can be strong? Trade, commerce, and technology should convene within NATO as well. All these areas are vital for national security. This is also how you know that these people, whenever they speak about democracy, what they actually mean is just their rule. They don't really want democratic decisions. They don't want negotiations and a back and forth. They don't want a plurality of voices. They don't want different avenues and different routes of dealing with each other. They want centralization. And NATO is a very nice institution for them, because just like the European Union, it's highly bureaucratic, and bureaucrats are insulated often from political processes. Bureaucrats, they don't need to stand for re-elections. Bureaucrats are appointed, and bureaucrats are the permanent state, right? They are the people who stay. In that sense, the European Union with Ursula von der Leyen is not a very good example, because these people actually rotate, right? And they're being taken out. I mean, the European Union is at least a semi-democratic institution, not a good one, but at least semi-democratic, with like some rotation of personnel. But in NATO, the people who are appointed, I mean, those are people from the same group, from the same caste, same class. These are often diplomats that have served already in other places, and then they're being put into these places of power, into the bureaucratic places of power, where they remain. And I have here an example, by the way, from Switzerland, because also Switzerland is being sucked into this BS at the moment as we speak. The Swiss, for the first time, appointed a secretary for security policy, state secretary for security policy, which in the Swiss context is just the top guy serving under the minister of defense, and being responsible for his department. It's like a department chief, but it's like head of the department. And this department for security policy is new, that was created recently, and now they appointed this new guy, Marcus Matter, to be its first top leader. And guess where this person comes from? I mean, he got his he was a visiting fellow at the Center for Defense Studies at King's College London. He's a PhD as well. I mean, very impressive. I mean, I'm pretty sure he's worked a lot. And he went on to serve as deputy military representative for the Swiss mission to NATO in Brussels, because the Swiss, I mean, they're not part of NATO, but of course they have diplomats there. And he was one of those guys. And then he studied at the National War College of National Defense University in Washington, D.C., graduating with a Master of Science in National Security Strategy. And now this person who has been firmly groomed and came to and grew up within the transatlantic network. Now this guy is top of Switzerland's the state secretary for security policy. So he's famous for being a transatlanticist and having very strong pro-NATO feelings, although Switzerland is still neutral. But you can see how the neocons are working on dissolving that one as well, right? Little by little. And that's by putting the right people coming into these places of permanence, right? Because even if the Minister of Defense in Switzerland changes, this guy and this position will stay on, right? So you've got the bureaucratic apparatus that's in place, and this is exactly what's happening in other places as well. And what these transatlanticists and these NATO warmongers are dreaming about, to just enlarge this institution and enlarge its capacity to function as a funnel, right? Funnel the military capacities of different member countries, which then in the end, of course, leads also to a joint military structure. So basically, it's the solidifying of these different capabilities under NATO. And not only the member countries and the different aspects should be unified under NATO, according to this guy. In addition to globalizing its agenda, NATO should also expand the participants in these discussions to include Indo-Pacific partners such as Australia, Japan, New Zealand, and South Korea. So the eastern and southern countries that we usually refer to as the collective West. So basically, a collective West, a military organization that reigns supreme, not just over military matters, but also economics and commerce, trade, and so on, right? I mean, everything, because everything is national security. It's like a very fascist idea, actually, that everything has to be focused on the needs of the military permanent state. The bloc could also establish a council of NATO members and Indo-Pacific states, akin to the NATO-Ukraine Council. Now there come the ideas of, how to do this bit by bit, of creating these different councils, and NATO is already doing that, right? In order to include partners that have nothing to do with the North Atlantic. And here are a couple of more ideas and a couple of more background info. I mean, it's a fine written article. The guy knows what he talks about. I just thoroughly disagree with what he wants to happen. NATO already has an institutional mechanism for a broader approach to security. So then he talks about all the ways that you could make this happen, so that people know that this is not just an idea. And it is not just an idea. I mean, this is what people are working on. We could see it, I mean, again, with the way that Ukraine was integrated into NATO, not by making it a member, but by making it the sacrificial lamb. And the sacrificial lamb is even happy of being that lamb. That's the sad part about it. At least the people on the top. A broader and more global NATO would help overcome the hobbled, overly complex decision-making processes among the Euro-Atlantic allies and their partners in the Indo-Pacific. Again, these people are not democrats. These people are autocrats, and they want to consolidate power in their hands, and they do so under disguise of national security. And we will bring you more peace, of all the peace that we've been bringing with our bombs, all the peace that we've provided to Ukraine. It's sick. It is sick, but that is the mindset. And of course, these people will always claim that the other one is the only one responsible. Only Putin is responsible for the war in Ukraine, nobody else. And the Chinese are responsible for what we are going to push to make a reality, the war over Taiwan that we really, really want. That's going to be completely, utterly on China. And we've been telling everybody, we've been preparing for this war, and we're going to tell everybody that we were right once we have the war, and then we're going to put the blame on the Chinese, and then we're going to wash our hands in innocence, and we're going to let the others do the dying. So this is, and I believe this guy is probably even honest with what he says. I believe that he believes that this is what should happen in order to, I don't know. The one thing I don't know is, do they want peace and security, or do they want these wars? That's the one thing I don't know, because they could be psychopaths, right? People who just lack the ability to feel all kinds of empathy, any kind of empathy, and therefore they want war. They will just use the wording of, oh, we want to prepare for peace in order to get their war. That's the one thing I don't know. But that's the agenda, my friends. That's the agenda for 2024 and beyond. The case for a bigger, bolder NATO. The monster, the Kraken, is probably going to grow, and it grows slowly, but it will grow steadily. And with every major crisis, these people will use each single one of them to make their case to get more money, more funding, and more centralization into NATO, into these institutions, and then have more power to send people to war. That's what we have to speak out against.